Welcome to Wife Secrets channel. We hope you will have fun with us. Enjoy watching. I'll never forget the moment I saw my big horse Blaze standing in the field that day. He was my pride and joy, a sleek ****nut beauty with a gentle soul. I'd raised him since he was a foal, pouring my heart into every ride, every moment spent brushing his coat, and every quiet evening just sitting with him. Blaze wasn't just a big horse, he was family, and yet what happened next shattered my trust in someone I thought I knew better than anyone. It all started when my best friend Arthur came over to visit. Arthur and I had been friends for years, practically brothers. We'd done everything together, from camping trips to late-night talks about our biggest dreams. He was the kind of person I believed I could trust with anything. So when he asked if he could spend some time with Blaze while I ran errands, I didn't think twice. After all, Arthur had always shared my love for big horses. What could possibly go wrong? When I returned, everything seemed normal. At first, Blaze was standing near the fence, his ears twitching as usual, and Arthur was sitting on the grass nearby, his phone in hand. But something felt off. Blaze didn't nozzle me like he always did. Instead, he flinched when I reached out to stroke his mane that wasn't like him at all. My ****T tightened as I tried to brush it off. Maybe he was just in a mood. I thought big horses have their days, right? But then as I looked closer, I noticed subtle changes. Small things that made my stomach churn. Blaze's coat had a strange sheen, almost as if something had been poured on him, and hastily wiped away. His usually vibrant eyes seemed distant, almost wary. And then there was Arthur, acting a little too casual. He was cracking jokes and trying to distract me, but there was something in his voice, something strained. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something, so I decided to press him. "Everything okay with Blaze?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Arthur froze for a split second before laughing it off. "Yeah, man, we're good. He's a great big horse. You know that." But the way he avoided my eyes sent alarm bells ringing in my head. I decided to check the stable camera footage later that night. It was a decision I wasn't prepared for, but I knew I had to trust my instincts. What I found left me speechless, my heart racing faster than it ever had before. I could never have imagined Arthur doing that. What did he do to Blaze? Why would someone I trusted so much betray me like this? If you've ever felt the sting of betrayal from someone close, you'll understand why this story changed everything for me. Stay tuned, because what I discovered next will leave you just as shocked as I was that night. I sat in front of my laptop, my hands trembling as I opened the stable camera footage. Blaze's stable was my sanctuary, a place where I always felt calm and connected to something pure. But as the video loaded, I couldn't shake the dread creeping up my spine. I wanted to believe I was overthinking, that Arthur would never do anything to hurt Blaze or betray my trust. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The footage started off normal. Blaze was his usual playful self, tossing his head and trotting around the pen while Arthur watched him for a moment. I even smiled. Maybe this was all in my head. But then the mood shifted, Arthur's expression changed, and his movements became sharp. Almost impatient, he kept looking around as if to make sure no one was watching. My heart sank as I leaned closer to the screen, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Arthur reached into his bag and pulled something out, a small bottle. I couldn't tell what it was, but the way he held it made my ****T tighten. He walked over to Blaze, who backed away slightly, his ears pinned back. That's when I knew for sure something was wrong. Blaze had never acted that way around Arthur before. He was always so trusting, so eager to please. Arthur's voice came through faintly on the audio, but I couldn't make out his words. Whatever he was doing, Blaze wasn't having it. The sight of my big horse's unease made my stomach twist into knots. What was Arthur trying to do, and why? I rebound the footage, desperate for answers, but all it did was deepen the mystery. As I watched the footage for the third time, my heart pounded harder with every second. The bottle Arthur pulled out wasn't one I recognized, and it didn't look like anything we'd ever used for Blaze. The way Arthur moved, hesitant but determined, was unsettling. He uncapped the bottle and poured a small amount of its contents into his hands, then rubbed them together like he was preparing for something. Blaze shifted nervously, stepping back, his ears pinned in clear discomfort. Why would Arthur bring something into the stable without telling me? My mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. Was it something harmful? Was he trying to test some kind of product without my permission? Or was this all a huge misunderstanding? But if it was innocent, Why did Blaze seem so distressed? And why hadn't Arthur mentioned anything? I decided to confront Arthur the next day. I couldn't let this slide, not with Blaze acting so off. When I called him, he sounded cheerful, almost too cheerful, like nothing had happened. "Hey man, what's up?" he asked, his voice casual. For a moment, I hesitated. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe this was all some bizarre coincidence, but the image of Blaze pulling away from Arthur kept flashing in my mind. "Arthur," I started, trying to keep my voice steady. "Did you bring something with you when you were with Blaze today?" The pause on the other end of the line was telling. It stretched just a little too long before Arthur finally answered. "What, no, just my usual stuff." Why, his tone was light, but I could hear the edge of defensiveness creeping in. "I saw the footage," I said, keeping my words measured. "You had a bottle. What was it?" Another pause? This time Arthur's tone shifted entirely. "Look, it's nothing, okay, just some calming oil I found online. I thought it might help Blaze relax since you said he's been a little jumpy lately." Calming oil? That didn't make sense. Blaze had never been jumpy. If anything, he was the most laid-back big horse I'd ever worked with. "Arthur, I didn't ask you to do that," I said, my frustration rising. "You should have told me first." Arthur sighed, clearly annoyed. "Now, relax, dude. It's not a big deal." I was just trying to help, but his tone wasn't reassuring, it was defensive. Almost angry. I hung up, not knowing what to believe. Was he really trying to help? Or was there more to this than he was letting on? Over the next few days, Blaze's behavior grew stranger. He seemed withdrawn, less eager to approach me in the mornings and more on edge. When I led him out to the paddock, I called the vet to check him over, but everything seemed fine physically. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed in him and that Arthur calming oil wasn't as harmless as he claimed. I started digging deeper, trying to figure out what Arthur could have used. I searched for products online, reading every review and warning label I could find, but nothing matched the description of the bottle I'd seen in the footage. The more I searched, the more questions I had. And with each passing day, my trust in Arthur continued to unravel. The days that followed felt like walking on a tightrope. Every interaction with Blaze was a mix of worry and confusion. He wasn't himself anymore, and it wasn't just me noticing it. Even the stable hands commented on how withdrawn he seemed normally. Blaze was the first to greet anyone who approached him, but now he stood at the back of his stall, his eyes darting around like he was waiting for something bad to happen. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever Arthur had done wasn't just about the calming oil. Something deeper was going on, and I was determined to figure it out. My gut told me to go back to the footage to scour every second of Arthur's visit for clues. This time I noticed something I'd missed before. When Arthur had finished rubbing the oil on his hands, he dropped the bottle into his bag so quickly it was almost like he didn't want anyone to see it. It was a small detail, but it felt significant. Why hide it if it was harmless? That night I called Arthur again. My voice was steadier, this time less questioning and more firm. "Arthur, I need to know exactly what you brought into the stable that day. Blaze hasn't been the same since, and I'm not letting this go." There was a long pause, and for a moment I thought he might finally come clean. But instead he laughed short and forced. "You're blowing this way out of proportion, man. It was just some natural stuff. Horses love it." Maybe Blaze is acting weird because you're overthinking. His dismissive tone lit a fire in me. I didn't believe him anymore, not even a little. If he was hiding something, I needed to find out what it was, so I did the only thing I could think of. I called in a favor from another friend who knew Arthur well. Someone who might have seen him with that mysterious bottle or overheard him talking about it. What I learned left me more unsettled than ever. Apparently, Arthur had been experimenting with a new product line, something he was trying to sell to big horse owners as a miracle calming solution. But here's the kicker. He hadn't done any proper testing. He was using animals to see if it worked without their owner's knowledge. My heart sank as the pieces started falling into place. Blaze wasn't just another big horse to me. He was family, and Arthur had treated him like some kind of lab experiment. I confronted Arthur face to face the next day, my anger barely in check. "You've been using Blaze to test your stupid product, haven't you?" I demanded. Arthur's eyes widened, but he quickly recovered, crossing his arms defensively. "It's not like that," he said, his voice rising. "I didn't hurt him. I just needed to know if it worked." His words hit me like a slap. "You didn't have the right to do that," I said. My voice shaking. Blaze isn't some test subject. He's my big horse, my responsibility. How could you think this was okay? Arthur didn't have an answer. His silence spoke louder than any excuse he could have made, but I wasn't done yet. There was still one thing I needed to know: what was in that bottle? And could it explain why Blaze had changed so much as the tension between us reached a boiling point? I realized this wasn't just about Blaze anymore. It was about trust, betrayal, and whether someone I once considered a friend could ever make this right. Arthur stood there, shifting uncomfortably under my glare, but I wasn't backing down. I pressed him again. What was in that bottle? Arthur? I need to know now. For a moment, I thought he'd stay silent. But then he finally spoke, his voice low and defensive. It's just a mix of herbs and some lab stuff. It's safe. I swear, lab stuff. I repeated, my voice rising. What does that even mean? You can't just dump something on my big horse and call it safe. Arthur threw his hands up, clearly frustrated. Look, I didn't think it'd be a big deal. Okay, it's supposed to help big horses stay calm and focused. I've used it on other big horses and they were fine. Other big horses. That word hit me like a ton of bricks. How many times had Arthur done this behind someone else's back? How many other animals had been treated like test subjects for his little experiments? My stomach churned. But before I could say anything, Arthur added, it's not just me. Okay, I'm not the only one involved in this. That stopped me cold. What do you mean? Not just you? I asked. Narrowing my eyes, Arthur hesitated, his jaw tightening. It's a group thing, he admitted reluctantly. Some guys I know are working on a formula to sell to bigger stables. We're trying to get it perfect before pitching it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Arthur wasn't just testing something harmless. He was part of a larger scheme, one that could potentially harm countless animals if it went wrong. My mind raced with questions. Who were these people? How far had they gone with their experiments? And worst of all, had Blaze suffered permanent damage from whatever this formula was? Before I could press further, Arthur's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his face palling slightly. I have to go, he muttered, stuffing his phone into his pocket. We can talk later, but I wasn't about to let him walk away. Arthur, don't you dare leave without telling me everything, I said, stepping in front of him. What's going on? Who are these people you're working with? Arthur hesitated, his eyes darting around like he was looking for an escape. You don't get it, he said. Finally, it's bigger than me. If I say anything, I'm putting myself at risk. At risk? His words sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't just about an experimental product anymore. Something darker was at play, and Arthur was clearly in over his head. But Blaze was my priority, and I wasn't going to stop until I knew exactly what had been done to him. As Arthur walked away, I realized I couldn't handle this alone. If this group was as serious as Arthur made them sound, I needed help. But who could I trust, and how deep did this whole thing go? My mind was spinning, and the stakes felt higher than ever. Blaze's future, and perhaps the safety of other big horses, was on the line. Arthur's words echoed in my mind as I stood in the stable that evening, stroking Blaze's mane. It's bigger than me. The thought sent shivers down my spine. I couldn't let this go any longer, whatever Arthur had gotten involved in. I had to get to the bottom of it, for Blaze's sake, and for every other big horse that might be at risk. The next day I decided to act. I reached out to a trusted equine vet, Dr. Liam, and explained everything from Arthur's strange behavior to the footage and the changes in Blaze. Dr. Liam agreed to run a series of tests on Blaze, both physical and chemical, to determine if there was any trace of the substance Arthur had used. While I waited for the results, I went back through my stable camera footage, searching for anything I might have missed. That's when I found it, a moment I had overlooked before. In the far corner of the footage, Arthur had left his bag unzipped for just a few seconds, and the label on the bottle was partially visible. It wasn't a calming oil or anything natural. The label read, Prototype Formula 38. My heart sank. This wasn't some backyard experiment. It was part of a calculated operation. I took a screenshot of the label and started digging online. After hours of searching, I stumbled across a small forum thread discussing experimental equine performance enhancers. The post was vague, but it mentioned a Formula 38 being tested in secret. My stomach turned as I read on. This wasn't about calming big horses. It was about pushing their limits, increasing their endurance artificially. No wonder Blaze had been so off. Who knows what side effects this stuff had? The vet called me days later with the results. We found traces of an unregulated stimulant in Blaze's system. Dr. Liam said, her voice calm but serious. Whatever this is, it's not approved for use, and it could have long-term effects if it's not flushed out quickly. I felt a mix of relief and anger. At least now I knew what had happened to Blaze, but the thought of Arthur willingly exposing him to this made my blood boil. I confronted Arthur one last time. I showed him the test results in the forum post and his face turned pale. It wasn't supposed to be like this, he stammered. They told me it was safe. I didn't know it would hurt Blaze. Then why hide it? I shot back. Why not tell me the truth? Arthur looked at the ground, his voice barely audible because I didn't want you to know. I was desperate. I'm in debt. They promised me a cut if I helped test it. His confession hit me like a punch to the gut. Arthur had sold out Blaze's well-being for money, but before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It read, "You've dug too deep. Stop now if you know what's good for you." I froze. This wasn't just Arthur's mistake. It was bigger than I had imagined. Blaze was safe for now, but the shadow hanging over this operation wasn't going away anytime soon. I stared at the message on my phone, feeling the weight of the words sink in. Whoever had sent it knew I was getting too close to the truth, and it was clear they were not going to back off easily. I looked up at Arthur, who was still standing there, his face pale and his eyes wide with fear. He could see it too. The situation was spiraling far beyond anything either of us had expected. "We need to go to the authorities," I said, my voice steady, but with a sense of finality. "This isn't just about you or me anymore. It's about what's happening to other big horses, and we can't just let it slide." Arthur shook his head, panic setting in. "If we go to the cops, everything will fall apart. I don't know who's behind this, but they'll make sure we pay." But I wasn't backing down. Blaze's safety had come first, and now I had to do the right thing for every big horse out there that could be affected by this shady operation. I told Arthur he had to make a choice, either step up and help me or face the consequences of being an accomplice. He stood there, torn, the fight draining out of him. In the end, Arthur agreed to help. I think he finally realized just how far he had gone and how it was time to take responsibility. With his confession and the evidence I'd gathered, we went to the local animal welfare authorities. They acted quickly, starting an investigation into the so-called performance enhancers Arthur had been involved with. It turned out that Arthur wasn't the only one in over his head. The operation had connections to some powerful people, but with the evidence we provided, they had no choice but to take it seriously. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Blaze had to undergo a detox treatment to flush the stimulant out of his system, and it wasn't easy. He'd been through so much, but I watched him slowly return to his old self, his usual calm demeanor creeping back into his eyes. Every time he nudged me with his nose, I felt a sense of relief that we were finally getting back to where we belonged. The whole experience had shaken me, but it also reminded me of something important. The bond we shared wasn't just about caring for Blaze physically, it was about protecting him, no matter what. As the investigation unfolded, more details came to light about the people behind the shady products. They were looking to make a profit by exploiting big horses, promising owners quick fixes that came with dangerous consequences. I knew this wasn't just about Blaze anymore. This was bigger than one person's mistake. It was about the welfare of animals everywhere and ensuring that people like Arthur didn't get away with putting profits over lives. Looking back, I realized that this experience had taught me more than I ever expected. Trust can be a fragile thing, and sometimes it takes a betrayal to see just how far we're willing to go to protect what we love. But in the end, standing by those who matter most, whether human or animal, is what truly defines us. Blaze and I had come out on top, and that's what kept me going every day. No matter what came, leave your opinion in the comments. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel.